Marcel preached one day and I'd preach the next. And we had converts and we picked out who we wanted to walk the aisle when we give the invitation. Because we had a baptizing service. We get down in there and walk in the water about waist deep and get out, and then we get in an argument about the proper way to baptize. Well, we about 25-1 Baptist to Methodist, so you know how we done it. And we got to where we could do it good. And one day, one of them Ledbetter boys showed up with his goat, leading that goat on a rope. And during the invitation, Marcel brought the goat forward. We're going to baptize a goat. Well, now, if y'all know anything about a goat, he ain't wanting to get in no water. Oh, and our Dale, Burnell, you, Dale, old Dale, and me, we had that sucker and we out in that water, and we trying to get that goat's head on the water, and he's saying, bah! Sound like he's saying, don't, don't, and we all, and he kicked one of us, horn butted one of us, and directly, you, Dale, just looked up and said, look, just go ahead and sprinkle the goat and let him go to hell. I run into Boxcar Willie the other day. He told me a beautiful story I want to share with you. He said, we was getting makeup backstage. And he said, Jerry, I want to tell you about possum hunting. He's from Canton, Texas. And he said when he was a boy, he caught a possum and he heard that there was a family in the community there that eat them. And he took the possum to Henry. Henry said, I'll give you 50 cents for him. Oh, that elated Boxcar. 50 cents back in them days looked big as a wagon wheel. So he got his possum dog, went that night and caught 2 more. Took them to Henry. He said, I'll give you $1 for him. So Box was elated, thrilled to death. And he told his mama, said, I got $1.50. Where'd he get it? Sold 3 possums to Henry for $1.50. His mama shamed him, said, now, Box, I saw you walk down the aisle of an old country church the other day, give your heart to the Lord, and there you are charging the poorest family in this county for food. Box, I'm ashamed of you. You ought to give Henry and his family that possum and not made them pay for it. So Box went that night and caught another possum, took it to Henry, and he apologized. He said, I'm so sorry. Oh, my mama shamed me. And here's you a free possum. He said, no. Liesel. That's Box's real name, Liesel. So, Liesel said, I want to give you 50 cents for the possum, and I want all you to bring me, because we eating the possum and getting $2 for each hide. And I talking to a friend the other day, believes in prayer, wanted me to join him in praying for a friend of his. And he said, Jerry, every time I pray, Lord, send me a chicken, very seldom do I ever get one. But I ain't never, under no circumstances, no time in my life, when I prayed, Lord, send me out after a chicken, I got one every time. I run into some doozies. I record for MCA Records. One of their big record executives wanted to go quail hunting the other day. And I met him in Jackson, Mississippi. He got off the plane, looked like little Lord Fauntleroy. And I took him down the route, Fort Liberty, Mississippi, where I live, and we went quail hunting, and he remarked about how beautiful my dog You use your own judgment, but the greatest coon dog that ever lived was a dog named Highball. Highball was the great dog on the coon hunting album I did 21 years ago that ended up being a platinum record, and I featured Highball. Smart dog. You could take the size board that you wanted to put the coon hide on. So I need a coon hide this size, and show it to Highball, and he'd go bring back a coon that fit that board. And he kept doing this. And one day it got hot in the house, and lady moved out on the back porch to iron. And Highball looked up and seen that ironing board. And Highball left, and he ain't been seen since. Fourth Sunday in July, we have dinner on the ground and preaching for a week. We've been doing this at the East Fork Baptist Church since 1810. And it is a necessity that families sign up to feed the preacher. And it used to be more necessary years ago than it is now, because my mama feeds the preacher every time they come, and she takes them to town and just buys them a dinner. But we couldn't do that years ago, and I remember everybody tried to have fried chicken, and this preacher come from Gloucester, Mississippi. He is kind of precise. And he went home with the Ledbetters. And they walked out, and Aunt Pet Ledbetter got Ardell, Burnell, Raynell, W.L., Danell, Odell, Udell, Marcel, Claude, Eugene, and Clovis around the table and brought out a big platter of fried chicken and set it right in front of the preacher. Preacher said, I sure hope that you didn't kill a chicken just on my account. And Uncle first said, no, actually, said, that old hen's been sick about a week, and she finally died yesterday. I was doing the theater in the round at Boston, Massachusetts. 9 nights, Cohasset Theater. Me and Hank Jr., we outdrew Engelbert Bumpum-Dinkum. And the guy what introduced me said, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Grand Ole Opry star Jerry Clower to the land of the bean and the cod. Well, my mom would have been there. She'd slapped him. Cod in Boston is a fish. And they eat the fish with beans. Well, that's all right. I didn't try to straighten them out while I was there. I'd rather have hush puppies with my fish. And them people were nice to me, them Boston Yankee folks. In fact, they carried me to one of the finest restaurants in that city. And they served me the biggest, reddest crawfish I believe I ever seen in all my life. And if I'd had a ball peen hammer, I'd eat the whole thing too. I had a preacher one time named Brother Maurice Wickard. He went to Golden Gate Seminary at San Francisco, California, right up the coast from San Francisco. And one of their requirements in order to pass a certain course, they had to go down and preach on street corner, hold street meetings, witness and console and help. full of snuff. Just zipping, running. One of them had a little sweet gum bush stick, and she was just kind of polishing her teeth with that snuff like that. And they had one Gourd Dipper to drink out of in that bucket. Said, take you a drink of water. He done said he wanted some water bad. He's thirsty. We done had us a drink. Said, drink. Well, he dipped up that water, and he noticed the end of the handle on the gourd had been cut off. And he turned and just drunk the water out of the handle. And one of them spit and said, look at that, big educated man, drinks out of a gourd just like me. Well, a fellow one time to die that lived not far from me, and they put him in some of his folks' homes in a house down there on the edge of a field, about a quarter of a mile behind where my granddaddy lived, and me and my brother Sonny and my mama was living with him at that time. Well, about 3 straight nights, folks would be coming by there 3 and 4 in the morning, just talking loud and waking us up. And my grandpa said, when y'all gonna bury that fellow? They said, Sunday. Well, that's 4 more days. And my granddaddy slipped over there one evening and got a baked sweet potato and peeled it good and took a delicious bite out of that sweet potato where his teeth marks would show, and eased around there and put it in that fellow's hand, laying in that casket. And they buried him in an hour and a half. Lord, good to me last year. Had the best year I ever had. And I told Homerline, my wife, I said, I'm going to buy the pickup truck of my dreams. Oh, and I bought it a month ago. I'm so proud of it. I drove to Jackson, Mississippi to the airport, flew to Las Vegas, did a show at the Palladium, flew back to Jackson, got in my brand new pickup truck and started down Interstate 55 going home, and it commenced to raining. Then it commenced to raining harder. And then it rained harder. And then it come a chunk floater, a frog strangler. It is just like riding on a lake on Interstate 55. Whoo, it is raining. And I looked and my gas needle was getting toward empty. Well, in my last car, I would have had 6 gallons of gas left. But I don't know how close this new pickup truck is capitulated up there with that needle. When it gets to E, it might mean E. No, got to be a couple of gallons. I'll get on to the house. That sucker run out of gas. I pulled over on the shoulder of the road when it started spitting, and I'm sitting there like I'm in Noah's Ark. It's flooding. And in about 15 minutes, I said, hallelujah. I saw a blue light ease up behind me. Well, just to step out of my pickup 1 minute, it's just like running and doing the preacher seat in the local swimming hole. You that wet. Just wham! So he spooled the window down, and I peeped in there, and he said, Jerry Clower, you rascal, what you doing? Done run out of gas. Don't tell nobody. I don't want them to know I miss dumb. Whoo, he said, looks like you got a beautiful new pickup. I said, yeah, but I don't know how to read the gas gauge. He said, get in, I'll take you and get you some gas. I said, I'm too wet. Just get in here. You won't hurt it. So I got in, we run, got some gas, come back. I finally poured it in there with water running off of my nose like a hose was turned on it. And I got back in my brand new pickup of my dreams. And I stopped at the country store. great athlete. And he got out of college, he got him a job coaching high school, and he had such a fabulous record. Fabulous coach, had a fabulous record, and I'm just so proud of him. And one day he got a letter to come to speak at a coaching clinic way out in the middle of a county. He'd never been there before. And driving up to the school, he stopped at a country store. And Duber said, "Sir, do you have a restroom?" And the man said, "Yeah, it's out back." Well, Duber went out back and like to fainted. The restroom was an old Privy, just sitting out there, back of the store. Looked like them kind that the WPA built years ago. Am I talking over your head? And Duber went to open the door, and just as he went to open the door, a middle-aged man stepped out of the building, holding the bib of his overalls and grumbling. And Duber said, "Sir, you got a problem?" He said, "Yeah." He said, 22 cents slipped out of my bib pocket and went out in that dad-blame hole. Duber said, "Well, I'm so sorry." Well, the man reached in his pocket and throwed a $20 bill down in there too. Duber said, "Sir, what in the world are you doing?" He said, "You don't think I'm dumb enough to go down in there for 22 cents, do you?" I was walking through the park in Nashville the other day and saw an old friend of mine sitting on the park bench, and he was crying. He's 90 years old. I've been knowing him a long time, and I walked up to him and I said, "Oh, sir, what's the matter?" He said, "Jerry, you know, I lost my wife and I married this real young woman." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Everything's lovely. I mean, we are lovey-dovey. We getting along wonderful." I said, "Well, man, you ought to be rejoicing. You ought not to be sitting there on a park bench crying." "Why are you crying?" He said, "Jerry, I'm crying because I can't find my house." We got a preacher in my county, got aggravated with the congregation, and the other day he let the hammer down. I mean, he got up one Sunday morning and said, "We just play in church, and we ain't doing it right. And as we leave the church house on the Lord's Day morning, we need to carry the church out into the workplace, and we ain't doing that. And we got to quit just messing around." And said, "Next Lord's Day, I want all y'all here. We're going to start during the Sunday school hour. We ain't going to have Sunday school. I'm going to start preaching at 9 o'clock, and I'm going to preach all the way through the Old Testament. Then I'm going to preach all the way through the New Testament. And we going to cover the whole Bible next Sunday. We going to quit playing church." Next Lord's Day, they all showed up. Oh, he hung his thumb over that Bible, and he got to getting with it. I mean, he shelled down the corn. By 1:30 in the afternoon, he got through with the Old Testament. He said, "Now, as soon as we stand and sing one song, we gonna take off on the New Testament." He said, "Uh-oh, my goodness. We overlooked Isaiah. We've got to find a place for Isaiah this afternoon." Well, one old godly woman got up about halfway back and said, "Preacher, you don't have no problem. You can give Isaiah my seat because I'm leaving." I remember when I was in the 11th grade at East Fork Consolidated High School, we had a blooming old workbook. I hated that thing. Oh, every day, get your workbook up, and I just despised that workbook. Well, the last day of school, we made it up. School's out. Here's your report card. Bye. We got on the school bus, and them girls and Ardell, Burnell, Raynell, W.L. Linnell, Odell, Udell, Marcel, Claude, Eugene, and Clovis Ledbetter started tearing up them red books. Whew, they was tearing up them old red-colored workbooks, just snatching them. And I had the window down, and I'm throwing paper out the window. Looked like a snowstorm on each side of that school bus. We was kicking up dust, and the paper was just fogging the ditches. 2.5 miles later, after it looked like it snowed behind that school bus, I got off of the bus, and here come a 40 Ford, kicking up dirt. Slammed on brakes, and it was Mr. Turner, principal of East Fork School. He jumped out of that 40 Ford, said, "Jerry, you the big Ike in this. Get in my car." I'm giggling inside me. School's out, hoss. You done drove up here in front of my house. This is a public road. How dumb can you be? I'm just giggling. I ain't giggling out front because he may have hit me in the mouth. Said, "You done throwed paper out, and these folks that helped you. This is disgrace. One of the yards you littered was a trustee of the school. I'm ashamed of you, and I'm going to take you and whoever else was involved in throwing out that paper back to the schoolhouse and whoop you." Well, about that time, my mama walked out on the front porch, standing there with her arms folded, looking down at us. We standing there by the mailbox. I said, you done had it now, buddy. My mama's finna get you. My mama said, "Mr. Turner, if my boy's done something he shouldn't, you have my permission to tie him up." This old lady in my county told her husband the other day, said, "It's our anniversary. You gonna take me to supper?" He said, "All right, I'll be out there in the yard waiting for you by the car." Well, the old lady got out there in a little bit, and the old man was standing by the car, and he's standing there shaking his head. Wife said, "What are you shaking your head for?" I said, "Well, 50 years ago today," said, "your daddy caught me and you right over there. And he grabbed me and shook me and said, 'Boy, you gonna marry my daughter, or I'm gonna send you to the penitentiary for 50 years. And the old man shook his head and he looked up at that woman. He said, "I'd be getting out today." Everybody needs a friend like Marcel Ledbetter. He asked me the other day, he said, "Jerry, you remember the first picture show you ever saw? You remember the first car you ever saw? You remember the first girl you ever kissed? You remember the first time you ever dived in the swimming hole in place of jumping in feet first? You remember the first time you could plow a mule by yourself?" I said, "Marcel, do you remember the first slice of light bread you ever saw?" He said, "Yeah, I put it between 2 pieces of cornbread and eat it." I know something about bloodlines. You show me a bull and a cow, and I'll tell you what color the calf will be. And I'll never miss it. Bloodlines, your cholesterol count was put in you by your mama and your daddy. If you wanted a low cholesterol, you needed to get your mama and daddy tested before they birthed you. Now, you can keep it from going any higher, but you ain't never going to put it no lower than what your mom and daddy decided it'd be when they conceived you. You ain't never seen a mule run in the Kentucky Derby, have you? He ain't built right. Because he ain't bred right. He ain't built for speed. It's very obvious some folks don't understand about bloodlines. A fellow told me the other day with a Yankee brogue, said, "Jesus, you're stubborn as an old mule." I said, "Man, smartest creature I ever been associated with 4 legs was a mule." You plow a horse, and a horse would plow till he fell dead. But a mule, he'll stop before you kill him. Back in my fertilizer selling days, I called on a man that had a 30,000-gallon tank to put anhydrous ammonia in. I sold him anhydrous ammonia. Me and him riding through his field one day, and I said, "Look at that gray mule, ain't he pretty?" He said, "Yeah. He's been on the place 35 years. Papa won't let us sell him to the dog food folks. He's just part of the family." I said, "Well, why is he? Ain't got no hair on one side." He said, "Yeah, that's a smart sucker, that gray mule. He's done found out that anhydrous ammonia tank is cold. See, as long as anhydrous ammonia is under pressure, it's a liquid. And that tank is cold, cold, like a piece of ice." And said on these hot days, that mule's found out that tank's cold, and said he pops his body up against it and just walks down that tank, cooling off. That's his block of ice. And said he done rubbed all the hair off of each side with his big 30,000-gallon air conditioning unit. Now, don't you know a goat or a hog or a gorilla or a camel, they never would have figured that out. But that mule, he found that cool spot. We got a fella at home that's so opposed to smoking that he'll run up and snatch a cigarette out of people's mouth and throw it on the ground and stomp it out. I saw him do it at a restaurant the other day. Just run and grab one out of a fella and just stomped it out on the floor. He'd been doing that for the last few years. Wonder somebody hadn't killed him. But they don't have to kill him now because he died the other day from cancer of the foot.
Hallo. Det bästa var ju men nu sen är det ju igen. Så below. Ja, det är ju inte det där. Bra. Liu. Yes, no chef and now he's doing this wasn't that. How's that chef that you in? Person is ass bad that hill. That is you hearing it. What they roll, just walk you were them down the walls away, find the organ.